Welcome back, and we're going to be working on some HTML as well as a little bit of JavaScript to connect our HTML elements to the JavaScript code. We've already got our basics set up. We've got the HTML file, the JS, and the CSS file, as well as we've got a window open on the right-hand side. So this is the live preview, and this is available in brackets. You can also go to open up the file in your own editor and your own browser, and while you're working on the file, it's always good to be able to see it visually. And the reason I do this is for the course, and then as well, I'm going to open up the developer console in the bottom right-hand side so that we can as well communicate between what's happening on our page and what's happening within our code and our script. So we're going to be able to see the HTML as we make updates. So we do need some basic HTML structure in order to get started. So I'm going to add this into the body area. First, let's do a quick beautify, clean up the code, and save it. And we're still getting that hello popping up, so let me just get rid of that because we're not going to need that anymore, and we're not going to need it in our game. We're going to do some really cool things with the game, and sending an alert is actually not one of them. So setting up a div, and usually I like to have a top bar here, and this can be how we can communicate. We can have some information, maybe a start game button in there. And this is kind of at the top of the screen that we're going to be placing this. So class and adding in start, and then we're going to style it as a button. So we'll select the element by start, and then we'll do some styling and create buttons because we probably are going to need a few different buttons within the game. Also, let's create another div and class of main. So this is where all of our main game area is going to go. We're going to have two side menus, sidebars, so a left side and a right side. So let's create those separately, and these can have a class. They can have the same class as they can be a cell or a column. How about we just call it column side so that we can distinguish it from the right side, because we are going to need to use JavaScript to place content into this element. And also the class of game area, and this is where all of the main gameplay is going to go. And I'm going to float all of these to the left, so that's where I'm going to add in the cells. So all of the cells are going to just be a left float and align them, and we use a 3-column output. So do one last one, and this is going to be a cell as well, and the right side. So if we ever want to put anything on the right side, I've got auto close set up on brackets. That's where it's closing it automatically. And then also for communication with the user, let's create a few modals, and these modals will give us an ability to send some information. So we need one modal for being able to communicate the next step, and then another one where we're going to show to the user just a message. So this will be our message modal. So modal 1 is going to be used just for sending in messages. And then the other modal that we're going to create is going to actually have the action. So where the player is making the decision whether they're going to take the deal or not. So call this one modal content. And I usually like to add in the close button, because this one, the user is going to need to close it, or they can click off of it to close it. So of course, we're going to set all of that in the upcoming lessons. And I'm going to just add in the little times X there so we can close it. You can see it showing up here within the display area. So that's our first modal. And then of course, we also need an area for some content. So div class, and this can be the modal body. And for now, we'll just put test content. And we're going to update all of this with our JavaScript. Let's duplicate this, and we'll reuse some of this HTML code for our modal 2. So we've got modal 2, and we can have modal content so that this structure of the pop-up can be the same. We don't want to have a close button because we don't want users to be able to close it. We want to be able to pass in the message, and we want the users to be able to make a decision in this screen. So we're going to add in the modal body in here. So then we'll call this modal body 2, so we can distinguish between the two. And I need to also to move this one down. I do the same here, because I want the modal content to wrap around the modal body. And then so the modal body is going to be the content that we're updating. And then we also want to have another div at the bottom. And then this is going to contain the various options that we have for the user, because we're providing the user an option. So this is going to be a deal, offer, and we'll give another class so that we can style them the same. So there's going to be a difference between a deal and a no deal. So usually if the user presses deal, then they're accepting the offer. And if they press no deal, then they're not accepting the offer. So I'll just realign that so it's a little bit easier to read. And I'll move up the screen and paste this. And I'll move this over as well. And then this one, the only difference here is going to be, this will be no deal. We want to be able to distinguish between them. And in this one, this is the user declining the offer. So we're going to place the offer in modal body 2. And then the user is going to have two options. Either they accept the offer or they decline the offer. So that's our basic HTML structure, and we shouldn't actually need more than that. So let me just clean this up. And of course, right now it doesn't look like a whole lot, and we need to apply some styling, and also we need to hook up some of the JavaScript. So let's create our basic JavaScript structure as well. So we're going to wrap it all within one object, and this will be an object that we're going to invoke, and all of the gameplay is going to sit within this object. So usually the way I like to do this is just to kind of have a separation from it, and it's going to invoke this particular function to return, and it's going to return the init object as the init function that of course we're going to still create. So init. So it's returning back an object, and then using the document add event listener for the DOM content loaded. So this is the same thing that if you've worked with jQuery, that you see that we've got DOM content loaded, and it's waiting for all of the DOM content to load. And then what we're going to do is we're going to initiate the app init function whenever the DOM content is loaded. When the page loads, and init function. So it's all wrapped within that app object. Sure that everything is working properly, we're going to have the ready console log ready. So what's happening here is that when the page loads in the document add event listener and listening for DOM content loaded. So this is the same thing that you do with jQuery to make sure that the DOM has loaded before you try to interact with the elements. And because this is a DOM-based game, we've got to make sure that the page content has loaded. That's why we've got DOM content loaded, and then we're running the app init. And the app init is referring to the app object that has a function inside of it, which is init, and it's returning the init is just going to be a self-invoking function. So of course, this is just one way to structure your application, and it's going to be a self-enclosed object the whole entire game, which is going to make it a lot more flexible and easy to bring into other JavaScript projects so that we don't have any overlapping values and variable names. So go ahead and set it up, and you should be at the point where when your page loads, you should load some of that HTML as well as see ready within the console of your web browser, and you're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson.